Early one morning in Munich, in the summer of 1965. In a few days, Fräulein Mara Bellet will be celebrating her 24th birthday. She was born in 1941, the year that Hitler decided, among other things, that she should never see a Jew. But that's finished now, and there's enough to do getting ready for the day ahead. In Berlin this summer day in '65, the tourists would soon be coming to see the wall. Down the road at Spandau prison, the troops of 4 nations took turns on guard duty, as they had for 20 years. There were only 3 prisoners left inside the fortress, the last 3 of the big Nazis, Hess, von Schirach, and Speer. Soon 2 would be released, and then there would be only Hess. On a suburban street in Cologne, the German police had orders to guard a certain office building. The Jewish nation was about to open diplomatic relations with West Germany, and there was no trouble. In a Hanover cemetery on that summer morning, they were burying one Norbert Prager, a local Jew. Where there were once 500,000 Jews in Germany, there were now only 30,000, and very few were young. A formal funeral. Such a ceremony for the dead will always remain unreal to those who were once in the camps. But there was little trouble now, and a Jew in Germany could once again live and die with dignity.
Lufthansa gibt die Ankunft ihres Fluges 025 aus Frankfurt bekannt. Die Überseepassagiere werden gebeten, sich zur Zollabfertigung zu begeben.
Into this German morning in 1965 came 30 Jews from America on a pilgrimage. They would stay but a day and a half. One was a Canadian, Bernard Laufer, a glass cutter from Toronto.
Alle Transatlantik-Passagiere werden gebeten, sich zur Zollkontrolle zu begeben.
Not to be disturbed by the luggage. If they will take the German luggage, I'm not interested in German luggage.
On this trip, some of the men have brought their sons, like Laufer with his boy Joey.
Ready, let's go.
Atlantic Hotel, guten Tag. Atlantic Hotel Hamburg. Hallo? Ja, Moment, wieder was. Jetzt wird hier wieder was. Auf 323.
Ich gehe raus. Ja, ich hab's.
Hallo? Hallo?
Herr Blomqvist, bitte. Herr Blomqvist, bitte.
Bernard Laufer will be meeting old friends, which is good. But he will be in Germany, which is no good at all. 24 years before, the Germans had officially classified Bernard Laufer as subhuman. For Laufer, that decision had drained the German landscape of humanity. This image looks down on Austrian farmers. This basement is preserved for tourists in Warsaw.
Betrifft Exekutionen. Bitte umgehend Mitteilung über Anzahl der durchgeführten Exekutionen getrennt nach A. Juden, B. Kommunisten, C. Partisanen, D. Geisteskranke, E. Sonstige, mehrere Angaben. Der Gesamtzahl.
But torture chambers were seldom used on Jews. They were not allowed the dignity of secrets. There were other places for Jews where one didn't need a radio to drown out the screams. In the Dachau concentration camp near Munich, where they keep this museum, there were few Jews left toward the end, and they were being kept in the medical wing. In Dachau, for the first time, doctors were able to conduct what they called terminal experiments, such as this gradual withdrawal of oxygen. Dachau opened in 1933. But the world had seen concentration camps before. In 1936, Hitler really opened the eyes of the world. There had never been superhighways like his autobahns. One night in 1938, Jewish property across Germany was demolished. Many Germans were embarrassed. One told a Life magazine reporter, "Don't look. This isn't the real Germany." Goebbels, the propaganda minister, admitted there had been isolated looting for Christmas trinkets. Then Hitler announced that war would bring the annihilation of the European Jew. It was assumed that this was a figure of speech. Well, Hitler had meant what he said. But it's a summer's day in 1965, and once again there are important visitors to be welcomed. You can see how important. Look at all the white mice. President of Italy. And in 1965, the Lord Mayor of Hamburg is a Jew. Bernhard Laufer was a Polish Jew. He was captured on the first day of the war and lived through 11 camps. The last camp was Bergen Belsen, and that is where this pilgrimage will end.
Sagen Sie, wie komme ich zum Hafen?
I was about 3 when I left, I think.
So you don't remember a thing?
Not a thing, no. Yeah, I was born in Bergen Belsen.
Bernhard Laufer was the youngest of a family of 12. They had always had big families and generally lived to a fine old age. A brother was the first to go. For 24 marks, the Germans offered to send the ashes back to the ghetto.
You couldn't go out, you couldn't go in. You depend only on one thing, and depending was only on the Jewish committee what was in the ghetto. It was a not bad Jewish committee.
These Jewish elders perform for Gestapo cameras. Centuries of oppression have told the Jew to yield and wait. The Germans were a civilized people. There would be great suffering, but it would pass. The Jews of Europe were gradually being dehumanized until they had become unreal. One child left a poem. It flew away, I'm sure, because it wished to kiss the world goodbye. And then I never saw another butterfly. Under cover of total war, Hitler issued the incredible order. The final solution to the Jewish question could begin. Every Jew in Europe was to be systematically exterminated. Bernhard Laufer's parents, 4 brothers, 4 sisters. About 6 million others, including these children, who were photographed first for propaganda purposes and then led into the gas. Is a German Jew who escaped. Not many escaped, so she came back 20 years later because many German children had never seen a Jew, and she felt that they should. Bernhard Laufer was taken to Germany as a slave. He was to be worked to death or returned to Poland for extermination. Jews were not exterminated in Germany proper, not even German Jews. The biggest death factory of all was just 9 miles from his home. That's where they gassed his parents. He's never been back to Auschwitz, although they made him help build it. It still stands in good repair, now waiting each morning for pilgrims and tourists.
It's one of the first gas chambers. It was used for children, so it wasn't even disguised as a shower room.
Jeśli ilość osób skazanych była mała, wyrok wykonany był na miejscu, nie wyprowadzano pod ścianę śmierci. I jeszcze na parterze po lewej stronie są...
This is the famous Wall of Death. On the left are the sterilization blocks, where women's wombs were filled with a thick, milky substance which hardened. It is in this area that Wilhelm Borger beat men's testicles until they died. Borger went into business after the war, but was recently arrested and is on trial in Frankfurt. Here is the roll call area. This was called Kaduk's Chapel, after Oswald Kaduk, who sat here selecting victims for extermination. After the war, he worked as a male nurse. He was called Papa Kaduk for his kindness, but he is also now on trial. This is one of the more popular sites at the camp, the gallows where the Poles hanged the camp commandant, Rudolf Höss, after the war. His father meant him to be a priest. I had to pray and go to church endlessly, he said later, and do penance for the slightest misdeed. They worked for the SS Office of Economy and Administration. Many were family men. They would go home in the evening and make love to their wives. Heinrich Himmler was proud of them. He said once, "To have stuck it out and remained decent fellows, this is a page of glory never to be written." Extermination was handled by 4 execution groups working with rapid-fire rifles in Russia and in 6 death factories working with gas in Poland. About 25% were selected for slave labor in the Krupp works and other respected industries. But in the end, they would all die. And why do you have to go back, Bernhard Laufer? Because I'm alive, says Laufer. And why are these men alive? They were tough and lucky, and they had a trade which made them temporarily useful. Laufer is a glazier, a cutter and fitter of glass. The family went into the business in the little Polish town near Auschwitz 150 years ago. This would have been the anniversary, this summer of 1965. But now there's just him in a small shop in West Toronto.
Did she phone you when I was out last night?
Joey will not carry on. Joey wants to work with people, not glass. His father says, be practical, be an engineer, learn a trade. Just one curious circumstance sets Joey and the other boys apart. They have no grandparents, or uncles or aunts. And that very day in 1965, some of the men responsible are on trial in Frankfurt. The papers are full of it. Here they come now. 17 of them, late of the Auschwitz administration. Some killed with gas and needle and club, and some with the pointing of a finger. Mulka, the adjutant, who kept track of things and then went into the export trade. Capesius, the druggist, who helped in 8,000 murders, but said he was always polite. Papa Kaduk, who sat in his chapel and admitted he occasionally had to pull himself together. Dr. Clare, who punctured hearts with a needle, and Bednarek, who interrupted torture for prayer, and Wilhelm Borger, who beat men's testicles until they died. The trial is being held in a community center. The recitations have gone on for 182 days. There are no shocks left. One of the prosecutors is Joachim Kögler, who served in the German army.
Have they been psychiatrically examined?
The defendant, Borger, examined by a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist says, I can't find anything abnormal in this man. And this is one of the most astonishing things that we find, that the SS men who acted there and who did such a brutal job, they are just Mr. Müller or Mr. Meyer.
Average, normal people.
Average people in normal life. Well, of course, those that are on trial here are some of those SS men who did the dirty work. The big problem is to get hold of those who sat on their desk and were giving orders by telephone. And it turns out that it is almost impossible to get hold of these people by the means of our law.
So the answer is to use the telephone?
Yes. This is such a devilish idea. I remember having seen a letter written by Himmler himself, who said, we don't have to take care so much of keeping this as a secret, because if someone is going to tell what he saw there, people won't believe him. There was a witness from Jerusalem, a Jewish man who works now there at the university, and he was deported to Auschwitz when he was about 14 years old, and his job was to go with other comrades to the gas chambers and pick up the ashes of the cremated bodies and scatter the ashes on the icy roads. And he told us that they had permission from the SS men in charge of one crematory to go down into the gas chambers while they were not in action and warm up there.
Warm themselves up.
Warm themselves up there.
Die Verhandlung vor dem Landgericht und dem Schwurgericht am Landgericht in Frankfurt ist eröffnet. Die Angeklagten sind vorzuführen.
The defendants stand on constitutional rights and refuse to enter the courtroom in the presence of a camera.
Hier sitzt der Verteidiger der Angeklagten mit ihnen zusammen in einem
But these defendants are about to go on the stage, played by actors.
Hier sitzt der Richter.
Final production plans are laid in Berlin for the premiere of a play by Peter Weiss, using nothing for dialogue but testimony from the trial.
Nein, das stimmt natürlich nicht ganz, denn das ist ja der Saal.
The play is dedicated to the proposition that once a crime has been committed, it becomes for all time a potentiality. After Auschwitz, all things are possible. The accused will be seated on the stage in such a way that they are merely an extension of the audience. Most of the witnesses will be unable to appear. These bones represent 700,000 witnesses from the Treblinka death camp. They're carried always by Zenon Gotaszewski, who lives in Lodz, Poland. His extermination was delayed for a month when he was ordered to help sort the clothing of the dead. One night he hid in the clothing and escaped to bear witness. I was sorting the clothes of the dead. I saw my father, my mother, my sister aged 28, and her 4-year-old daughter, all naked. And my father asked me if this was the end. What could I tell him? Somehow he understood. He was a heavy smoker and asked me if I could find him a cigarette stub. I found one. He inhaled a few times. My brother was with me sorting the clothes. The first thing he saw were his daughter's shoes, his wife's right beside them. 2 pairs of shoes. He picked them up himself and walked with them into the square. A few days later, he would load them up with the other clothes and send them to some German woman, some German child. Then they brought in my students. I used to teach in Warsaw. My students said, "Look, Mother, who is here. There is nothing to worry about. We are safe." And that is why I always carry the bones. Boga, Kaduk, and 4 others get the maximum sentence, life at hard labor. Most of the rest get lighter terms. 3 are acquitted, for it is murder which must be proved. Dr. Willi Schatz, the camp dentist, one of the college graduates at Auschwitz, goes free. Breitwieser, the camp disinfectant officer, was accused of dropping the first gas capsule, but the evidence is conflicting. Schobert, the Gestapo representative. "I killed no one personally," he tells the court, and they let him go. They rejoin the German crowd. And who will ever know who murdered by memorandum? Who did the filing and the typing from 9 o'clock to 5, with an hour off for lunch? In Vienna, there lives a man who lost 89 relatives. He is Simon Wiesenthal, known as the Hunter. Wiesenthal has tracked down 800 Nazis. When the diary of Anne Frank was denounced as a forgery, he searched out the man who caught her to prove she really existed.
Look, I was searching for the man who arrested Anne Frank 6 years.
You found him here in Vienna?
I found him here in Vienna, you know. And if you look for a little man, oh, this is a hard work.
And Bormann?
Bormann is in the triangle between Uruguay, Paraguay, and Brazil. I know very well all circumstances. He escaped from Germany, and yeah, I know the people helping him. I know a few girls living with him.
Is there anything we could do for you in Canada?
Oh, in Canada we have a few Ukrainians. Nazi Ukrainians was helping in the extermination of the Jews.
You know who they are and where they are?
In Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan. I have in my office. I have a few addresses and a few names.
Camp commander of Treblinka.
Of Treblinka. He is responsible for the death of 700,000 Jews.
You've tracked him down.
I know very well all steps from him. And I know his family, his wife and his 2 children. He was in Syria 11 years, and from Syria he is emigrated on a new name to another country.
You can't name the other country now?
No, this is better no. This is better no, because this is a problem is not finished,
and,
you know.
And it's impossible to have him arrested in this other country?
No, no. And one day he take a failure. Where's a failure?
Made a wrong step.
Made a wrong step. And I will waiting for this step. I have a time. I have time.
Just before Laufer left Canada, he heard his friend Trepman speak in Montreal.
We swore never to forget and never to forgive. Not to forgive not only the Nazis, not only the Nazis. Not to forgive the Pope in Rome that didn't do anything to save our people. Not to forgive Churchill, who was a wonderful politician and one of the greatest persons of our time, but who did not do anything. Not to forgive Roosevelt, a wonderful person, a great man, but not for us. And not to forgive many, many of our brothers, Jews, who lived in those days very comfortable and who didn't do anything, the smallest thing. We think about it always.
And if it could happen in the fairyland of Hansel and Gretel and the Pied Piper of Hamelin, could it not happen anywhere? And could it not happen anywhere if it could happen in the cultured land of Bach, Beethoven, and Schiller?
Ich habe den Inhalt Ihrer Sendung zwar vernommen, Westenberg, und wohl erwogen.
Wenn dieser Geist der allgemeine ist,
And how could it happen in a land of churches? There were some martyrs, it's true, but where were the other servants of Christ? And where were the scholars of Heidelberg? They were with the captains of industry and among the first to play along. And how could it all have started in the happy land of Bavaria? In this, the Hofbräuhaus of Munich, Adolf Hitler first laid out his program to the world. But why should that darken the festive summer night? A third of them are tourists. A third were too young. And the other third is sick and tired of the whole business. And where were the doctors? All 90,000 of them. 350 practiced mercy killings and terminal experiments. The others didn't get in the way. One was this Dr. Kurzke. He joined the SS on the advice of his professor to further his career. But when they sent him back from the front on a tour of the camps, he discovered the truth. Ridden with guilt, he began to save whom he could. One of those he helped save was Bernhard Laufer.
Look who's here.
All the way from South America.
All the way from South America.
Dann müssen Sie gehen.
Gaan we bij niet zo.
The evening of the first day, the survivors gather in Hanover, a few miles from Bergen Belsen.
My name is Laufer. How do you do? How do you do?
Mr. Bell Laufer?
Yes, yes I am.
I read the
British Brigadier Glyn Hughes was the liberator of Belsen.
Yes, that's grand to see you.
One of Laufer's fellow prisoners, Clara Silbernick, was once forced to assist Dr. Mengele, who specialized in lethal experiments on twins.
Oh, yes. I don't feel any older.
No, you look nice. You were a little bit skinnier, but now you look wonderful.
Yes. They came from every camp in Europe, but they all ended up at Belsen. And this is Joseph Rosensaft of New York, the leader of the inmates. He escaped 3 times from Auschwitz, but he has never told his story. He carried his iron will to survive into the peacetime world of business.
Hier is mijn bunkerfriend.
Belsen on Liberation Day 1945. One of these is Laufer.
I was living in Block 88. And I remember how 2 of my friends from my town, and they keep me under the arms, they took me out from the room to let me go because I couldn't walk even. I remember I received a cigarette, a goat flag. They gave me to smoke, and I make 2 puffs in the goat flag, I fall down.
They testified against their keepers, and a few, including Kramer, the commandant, were hanged.
But he has got an easy death. What does it mean? He has got very easy death.
Belsen had not been meant as a death factory, but as a holding camp for hostages. But as they were driven in from all over Europe, the machinery finally collapsed. Typhus swept through the animal chaos, and it was too much even for Himmler. The camp was surrendered. Three weeks before the end, they brought in Laufer, ruptured and weighing 70 pounds. He had to pick his way through 13,000 unburied corpses.
And the day before the liberation.
Well, maybe after I see Belsen, I'll change my mind. But right now, I've only seen two German cities, and I've seen the modern German people and how they work, and they seem to be just like any other people. I mean, so far, I really haven't seen anything different yet. Although I do have many prejudices, about the Germans. I mean, I have them, but I'm trying to judge them objectively, and so far I haven't seen anything bad. But I mean, you have all these camps like Belsen, Auschwitz, and all that, and I mean, these are memorials of what the Germans have done in the past.
Bergen, near Belsen, in 1965. The people of Bergen claimed to know little, and who knows, perhaps that's the truth. Except at the end, when the roads to the camp were littered with bodies. It is here on the Lunenburg Heath that Eichmann and other Nazi criminals hid out after the war. Hitler appealed to the rural people with his mystical connection between blood and soil, and the Jew had long been the scapegoat of the farmer.
This is where you all went after the old camp was built.
Yes, that's so.
That's right.
Yes, here we are coming to the place where we was liberated.
Aye, that's the way.
Now we are coming to the way.
That's the way.
The building?
The survivors found they weren't much wanted anywhere. Laufer stayed on until 1951. But there were some good times, and he married and had a son.
Let me go out for a second. Let us go out for a second.
They were kept down the road from the camp in the old SS barracks. In 1965, it is a NATO artillery range.
Officers, we are once inmate of that camp, you know what I mean? He was one inmate of that concentration camp.
Oh.
Oh, yes, we are there. Oh. This was the place where the English army move in.
Yeah.
From that place, here was it. And here they move in. So what you are, from England?
Yeah.
Or from Canada? For Canada's nobody here, only the English army.
The walls was built by the Canadians.
We still in Canada, we have to sing God Save Our Queen, that's all. But we sing our Canada too, don't worry about it.
The stench from this camp must have been incredible.
Well, it wasn't as bad as you think because, A, there was no flesh on them.
That's it. It was it's unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
You can't describe it by photographs, you can't describe it by word. You had to see it. Unfortunately, the SS was still armed and they were trigger happy.
They were shot after the liberation of the camp, actually.
Oh,
Shot on soldiers.
They shot a guy. I saw the men. They were shot for stealing potatoes from a pile outside the kitchen.
This after you had...
After we actually got into the camp.
Pretty hard to change, I suppose, after 5 years of shooting.
It's hard to change in 5 minutes. You see, we couldn't get in any great strength. We were still fighting the war. We just had a very few troops to spare for this to begin with.
How long did you interrogate Kramer?
About an hour, I think, the first. I wanted to get figures, you see, of here.
Was he perfectly honest and straight?
Oh, yes, he answered questions straight away. But what he had done, he destroyed all the documents, everything, every document. There wasn't a single document to be found.
But did they know how many prisoners
they must
had
have.
here?
Oh, yes, they must have kept the Germans are very good at keeping records, you know. They had very good records. I've still got his desk in my office here.
It doesn't give you the creeps?
No.
It's a very good desk.
It's a very heavy desk, I can assure you.
Yeah, everything is green, everything is nice.
It's a lovely part of the country.
Laufer's brother had always been the stronger of the two and had kept Laufer alive. But this brother had only 3 days of freedom, and then he died. All liberation meant for him was an individual grave. A Christian penance group of young Germans helps build a museum and information center. They are here for the fresh air, says an old workman. 30 years ago, they would have taken their fresh air with the Hitler Youth. But for much of this generation, the traditional German values, duty, efficiency, obedience, have turned sour. The older ones changed the subject, said one German boy. They talk of the air raids. I heard a man say the number of victims is greatly exaggerated, as if it mattered. Under this mound, or one of the others, are the bones of Anne Frank, for she was at Belsen with Bernard Laufer.
It has changed completely. Try to save it.
Nobody knows.
No, Bernard Laufer. Nobody knows.
Ik dacht in de tausender, dus zeg toch niet. They can make
10,000, 12,000.
They can make even 100. Well, who care about what they say? They can say what they like.
Don't hide it there. Don't hide the. Okay.
Don't feel anything.
Belsen. This is the... Wherever you look around here, the big ones.
The bigger one, what?
2,000, 5,000, 3,000 people.
Ah, what they say.
Individual graves.
Yes, individual graves.
Почув. Приїхали на Кольбіхозу, Вишігозу, Тошкогозу, Нехомозу, Даміро, Румей. Єй шломо рабо меншумаю, Хаїм, Олейн, Ваквадісуе, Вим Румейн. Haus vom Raumer, ja, das will auch nicht, was für die Stuhl, immer Rumey.
Von Schweigen von der Umgebungszeit.
You see, here lies 5,000 people. It's no true. For sure can be here 15,000.
Yeah, well, they didn't count
They
them.
can make it, no, next year they can make it 4,000.
Yeah.
Because they like it to clean up all the...
They want to minimize everything.
Minimize everything. So they...
I know, I think that they should have left it just like it was then.
Yes.
They shouldn't have done anything with it.
Herr Lehmann, bitte. Herr Lehmann, bitte.
Laufer has always cursed himself for letting them turn Belsen into a German garden. But Laufer's grief is shared by some Germans. This man, Erich Lüth of Hamburg, openly bears his burden of shame.
Well, I'm one of 50 or 60 millions of German cowards. Therefore, it's my opinion, and I regret that I have to state it, that perhaps we are a nation rich in military heroes, but underdeveloped in civil courage.
Es waren 1,20 Mark. Stimmt genau.
Stimmt genau. So, schön.
Do you come to Germany often?
I'm not just interested to come here. It's not why I'm not interested to come in, not to sit here, not to be in a restaurant, not to be in all this place. It's nothing for me, just I must come, I'm going to Bergen Belsen, it's another matter.
But that would be the only reason.
Only reason, nothing. Not other reason can bring me to this country.
A day and a half in Germany in the summer of 1965. The red carpet is rolled up. The Italian president has gone, and Bernhard Laufer is on his way.
Here's the große. No, you go in. The Reihe bin sitzen die back, einer the front. That's all. Zur Seite, ne?
There is this one place, still squatting on a Polish swamp. It is Birkenau, and perhaps it even frightened God. Birkenau, not the work of madmen, but a product of Western civilization. It once consumed 12,000 humans a day, 2.5 million in 2.5 years. And it probably would have gone on and on and on. An old German says, "We are a cursed generation. Not just us, but some of you too. We will take our horrible place in history. Can you just let us quietly live out our time? There is really nothing anyone can do."
Ja, soll denn etwas so Schönes nur einem gefallen? Die Sonne, die Sterne gehören doch auch allen. Ich weiß nicht, zu wem ich gehöre. Ich glaub, ich gehöre nur mir ganz allein.